Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So today's video is just gonna be a very casual sit down video. I'm gonna talk to you guys a little bit about this whole trying to conceive journey, and basically like the intention behind this video is I want to share with you guys a few things that may be helpful, tips, just advice, suggestions, just things that I have learned about trying to conceive that I think might be helpful if you yourselves are trying to conceive. First of all, if you guys are new to my channel, my name is Kayla and I am a stay-at-home mom. I have a 15-month-old baby girl named Riley. My husband and I are currently trying to conceive baby number 2. And like I mentioned in my very first like trying to conceive like update video, when I got pregnant with my daughter, we really weren't trying to conceive. I basically just got off the pill and then we just kind of decided, hey, if it happens, it happens, and it sure enough happened. So this time around is really when I really started to like look into trying to conceive, doing some research about trying to conceive, and I'm gonna share just some things that I've picked up along the way, things that like either I was just straight up like stupid, which maybe I was, like maybe I was just, I don't know, like some of the things that I'm going to tell you that I didn't know, I'm pretty embarrassed that I didn't know. But I know that I can't be the only one out there that didn't know some of this stuff. So whatever, I made a list here of things that I wanted to talk about. So let's just go ahead and get started. By the way, if you find this video helpful, or if you're just entertained by my lack of knowledge, or I don't know, if you're trying to conceive yourselves too and you find this somewhat helpful, make sure to give this video a thumbs up. It helps my channel big time, and I will love you forever. All right, so the first thing that I think is important to know if you're trying to conceive is first and foremost that there is a fertility window. There are certain days in your cycle that you are a lot more likely to get pregnant, and that window varies from person to person, but I think that for the most part it's like a 5 or 6 day window. I'm gonna preface all of this by saying that I am not a doctor. Literally everything that I'm gonna tell you is stuff that I have just googled, researched, heard from other people who are trying to conceive, or heard from other people who have gotten pregnant themselves. So take everything that I tell you here with a grain of salt. I encourage you to do your own research, but I hope that if you hear something that you're like, oh wow, like I haven't heard of that before, or I never thought of that, that'll kind of prompt you to do some research and learn a little bit more about it. So like I said, there is that window, and when you're trying to conceive, I believe that the most likely days for you to conceive are 2 and 3 days before you ovulate. If you're trying to conceive, it's not just like you get off of birth control and you just start going to town like rabbits and you're just more than likely to get pregnant. First of all, a lot of women struggle to get pregnant, and in reality, like you have to be a little bit more targeted with the days that you're actually doing the baby dance or having sex. You're having sex on the days that are outside of your fertility window, so like those 5 or 6 days around the time that you're ovulating, like it's great, you're having sex, but the chances of you getting pregnant from that action, like the chances are not that high. So with that being said, you want to have some kind of mechanism to track your cycle. I know that women who are actively trying to conceive and they're being a little bit more intentional about it, they have some kind of app that they're looking at to track their fertility. The app that I use right now is called Period Tracker, and it's working out just fine. It's basically just like a calendar, and then it'll tell me like on the day that I get my period, I just like say that, you know, my period started on this day. Then it'll track my cycle, and then I can say like what day my period ended, and then I can say like on which days I'm intimate, and it just kind of gives me an overview of what my fertility window looks like, what days I am most fertile. I definitely think that if you're gonna be using some kind of app, it's a good idea to start tracking your cycle maybe a couple months before you actually start actively trying to conceive, just so that you can give the app some more data, so that way it can really figure out what your cycle looks like and what your average ovulation days look like. It's gonna be a lot harder for an app to tell and to kind of give you averages if it's just like one set of data points. But I've also heard some good things about an app called Ovia, or I know that a lot of people are now using that Ava bracelet that does a whole lot more than an app. I think the Ava bracelet also tracks like your temperature and just like a whole bunch of other things that are associated with fertility and getting pregnant. Another thing that I really didn't know was that you're encouraged to use prenatals before you actually get pregnant. When I used to think of prenatals, it was just something that you would take like once you're already pregnant. But I believe that a lot of doctors will tell you to start using prenatals before you actually conceive, before you actually get pregnant, because there's something in the prenatals that I think helps with babies' like brain development, So it's just a good idea for your body to already have that stuff in it before you actually get pregnant. So I've been taking some gummies that I will link down below. Last pregnancy, like with Riley, I took like the Nature Made prenatals. They were like giant horse pills, like they were huge, those pills, and I did not enjoy taking them. So this time around, I'm just using some gummies. They taste delicious. I have 2 a night. Something else that I literally had zero idea about was the fact that there are ovulation tests. Like obviously I knew what a pregnancy test was, but I didn't know that there was an ovulation test, like the same kind of test strip that you pee on or you dip in pee. I had no idea that that was like a thing for ovulation, but there are ovulation tests. The point of those tests is really just to let you know when I believe you are very close to ovulating, so that way that's an indication that you should be having sex on those days. I myself haven't used ovulation tests yet, and I told myself that until I've been really trying for like 8 or 9 months, like if I get to the point where I've been trying for like 8 or 9 months and it's just not happening, just with like the app tracker and stuff like that, then if it hasn't happened by then I will go and I'll buy the ovulation test and then I'll start doing that. But I talked about it in the other video, like I don't want to get to the point where I'm like obsessing over it. So right now my husband and I, we just have the app. We're looking at my fertile window, and like this month we're just having sex every other day and seeing if that works. But I will tell you, with the ovulation test, make sure that you do your research on the ovulation test. The way that they read is very different from a pregnancy test. Like with a pregnancy test, if you get 2 lines, that's a positive result. With an ovulation test, if I'm not mistaken, even if you get 2 lines, like you might get 2 lines and you might automatically think like, oh, that means that I'm positive for ovulation. But it's about the darkness of the ovulation, like of the lines. So they have to be equally as dark as each other. So it's not like, oh look, I have 2 lines, one is a little bit weaker. That doesn't necessarily mean that you're ovulating. So whatever, just my point is to really look into the instructions of those ovulation tests so that you know how to read them correctly. Now, since we're talking about like reading the directions of the ovulation tests carefully, I'm gonna go ahead and say to read the instructions of your pregnancy test very carefully. I'm just gonna give you like a little story to help you understand why I say that. I didn't get my cycle back until like 12 or 13 months postpartum. So I was very late to the game in getting my period back. And so there was a time when maybe it was like 11 months postpartum or like 12 months postpartum where I hadn't gotten my period back, but I really felt like I had pregnancy symptoms. Like I really thought that there was a chance that I was pregnant. So I went to the store, I got the pregnancy test, I came home, peed on the stick, did the whole thing. And I was in a rush because like Riley needed my attention or something. So I left the test like on the counter and I was like, forget it, I'll just come back later and I'll read it and that'll tell me if I'm pregnant. So I was gone for a while. And then maybe like, I don't know, like 15, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, I don't know. I don't remember how long it was, but it was like way past 5 minutes that I came back and I looked at the test, and there was like a very, very, very faint line, but there was something that resembled the line. And I remember like looking at that freaking line, looking at it up in the sun, and like I was convinced that there was a line. But like the next day came and I took another pregnancy test and it was negative. So I wasn't pregnant. And later on, when I started doing more research about pregnancy tests and I started actually reading the instructions and reading through forums of like, what is this? I had a really faint line. The whole idea of an evaporation line is something that I learned about. And that's basically what I experienced. So some tests will leave an evaporation line. That's why the instructions on the test are very specific, and they'll tell you like read your results within 5 minutes or within X amount of minutes. So whenever a test is telling you like read the results within a specific time frame, I highly encourage you to do that, because things like that will happen. If you leave it there too long, there's a chance that something could go wrong with the test and have an evaporation line. So pay attention to what the instructions are saying. Something else about just like regular pregnancy tests, I bought a whole set of pregnancy, like the little dip tests on Amazon, super cheap, because pregnancy tests can be really expensive. Like a pack of 2 tests can be like $15, like depending on what brand you buy. So I have found that the Amazon tests, at least for me so far, have worked fine. I mean, I haven't had a positive test yet on one of them, but I have a stash that I keep under my sink in my bathroom. And I don't know, I just feel good knowing that I have those there. Like whenever I want to test, they're there. I don't have to run to the store every 2 seconds to buy a test, and they're cheaper. I've also heard really good things about the Dollar Tree pregnancy test, so that's something else that you might want to maybe like stock up on a few and just have some handy. I think it's also important to know that depending on what test you get, so there's a bunch of different brands of pregnancy tests, and each brand of pregnancy test has a different sensitivity level. Basically what the test is doing is they're trying to measure a certain hormone in your body. They're measuring HCG. So different tests, different brands have different sensitivity levels. So depending on the sensitivity level of those pregnancy tests, that's gonna depend on what the result is. That's why there's some brands like First Response. Those are the ones that are gonna tell you, like, I think they advertise like 6 days before your missed period is when you could potentially get a positive result. That's because the sensitivity level on that test is much lower. So you need a much lower amount of that hormone for it to say, hey, you're pregnant. So just be like aware of that. You might pee on a pregnancy test, and if it's a cheap pregnancy test where the sensitivity level is a lot higher, you could, in theory, pee on a pregnancy test, take that pregnancy test, and have it say that you're not pregnant. And then a few days later, a week later, you may take that same test, and now that your HCG levels have gone up, you could have in fact been pregnant all along. So that's why, like, if you have a suspicion that you could be pregnant or you're testing, if you haven't gotten your period, it's a good idea to test. And if you get a negative, I would probably test within the next 3 or 4 days, a week later, just to make sure that you're not pregnant. Something else that I didn't know about when it comes to like taking these pregnancy tests is that your first morning pee is the pee that you want to use when you're taking pregnancy tests. Your first morning pee is going to be like the most, I think it's like undiluted pee. There's gonna be more of that HCG hormone if you are pregnant in your urine. So that's why they tell you, like, take your pregnancy test first thing in the morning. If you're gonna test a couple times, maybe you just pee in a cup in the morning, and then that is your first morning pee for that day, and then you can dip your pregnancy test in there. And then there's also like a whole bunch of terminology that I knew nothing about whatsoever. Like TTC, obviously now I imagine maybe most people will know that that means trying to conceive, but there's a whole bunch of stuff, like when I was looking online on forums, like OPK, like there's like a whole bunch of like different acronyms like OPK, DPO, and those are all things that I had no idea what they meant. I had to Google everything. So OPK, I'm pretty sure means ovulation test. And I will leave like some of the most common ones that I've seen down below in the description if you want to like have like a quick little glossary of these terms. But I've also seen like DPO, which is days post ovulation. And I don't know, I just think that it's a good idea if you're trying to conceive to maybe kind of have an idea of what these things mean before you start looking through the forums and then you get frustrated. Like I remember I would be in bed like at midnight, like my mind racing, and I'd be like Googling like first pregnancy symptoms, and then I'm reading through forums and I'm getting frustrated because I had no idea what the hell any of this meant. So there you go. Like I'll leave you some glossary of information down below. And then the very last thing that I will say, because I know this video is very long by now, is to just be prepared emotionally. If you guys want to see that other video, if you haven't already, where I'm like talking about some of the things that I've been going through emotionally, mentally, just conflict with my husband about the whole situation, I will leave that link down below so you can watch it. But trying to conceive is not just a physical process. It's not just like, okay, you're gonna have sex every day, it's gonna be great, you're having the most sex you've ever had in your life, and your marriage is wonderful, and things are great. Like, there's a lot that comes with it. Just a lot of emotions, a lot of things that you're dealing with, a lot of feelings of maybe like inadequacy, like if it's not happening, and then you're like, why isn't it happening? Is it something that's wrong with me? There's frustration, especially like you really want something and then you can't have it. Like, there's just a lot that goes into it. So try to prepare yourself a little bit emotionally, mentally, like know what you're going into. But more than anything, know that you're not alone. Know that it's something that's very normal that we go through, and that this isn't an easy process. So I think that's everything that I'm gonna say right now, because I'm just really tired of talking. But if you have questions about anything that I rambled about, if there's something that I said that is straight up just not right, please inform me, let me know. But I really do hope that this was helpful. If you're someone who's new to the trying to conceive community, if this is your first time trying to conceive, or maybe you're like me, where like with your first baby you got pregnant super easily and it was great and you weren't doing all of this like trying to conceive stuff, and then now this time around you're trying for a second baby or a third baby, and you need to be a little bit more proactive about it, a little bit more intentional about it. It's not happening as easily. Hopefully this will help you I don't know, with something. Yeah, that's gonna be it. I hope you got something from it. Make sure to give it a thumbs up if you did, if you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you're new, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye, guys.